Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
When my wife and I found out we were expecting twins, we knew our one-bedroom studio apartment wouldn't cut it anymore. The metal fire escape being the only entrance wasn't exactly ideal for a pregnant woman, let alone for managing two babies. After some searching, we found this perfect house. Newly renovated with plenty of space and a beautiful garden. The moment we got the keys and the owner drove off, our next-door neighbor appeared out of nowhere. She immediately started lecturing us about noise, telling us we weren't allowed to make any sounds before noon because her boyfriend worked nights and needed his sleep. She then went on with a whole list of rules we needed to follow. Great first impression, right? We figured we'd try to keep the peace and planned any noisy activities for afternoon. The rest of the street welcomed us warmly, especially after my wife nearly died giving birth to our twin girls. But they also warned us about these neighbors. Turns out, the boyfriend was a local bully who picked fights with everyone. They were also illegal radio broadcasters, blasting this awful Dutch music Thursday through Sunday until 5 a.m. Perfect neighbors when you've got newborn twins, right? The drama really kicked off when my father-in-law came to help lay new grass in our garden. He parked his trailer in the public space behind our houses, and suddenly, the boyfriend appeared. He started yelling at us to move the trailer, claiming it was his spot. I told him it was public space and we weren't moving it. He kept threatening us, saying we'd better move it or else. I just told him to get lost because we were working. When my father-in-law was leaving, the boyfriend came out again. This time he threatened my father-in-law, warning him to never park there again or he'd regret it. That's when I lost it. Nobody threatens my family. I ran outside and warned him that he'd be the sorry one if he didn't back off right then. He backed down, but inside I found my pregnant wife crying, terrified he might hurt her, father, or me. I had to promise not to escalate things, but I was already plotting. After our twins were born through emergency C-section, we spent 3 nights in the hospital. Coming home should have been a happy moment. Our family had even put up a welcome sign for the babies, but these neighbors, they celebrated by partying non-stop, blasting their illegal radio station from noon until 6 a.m. every single day for 2 weeks straight. We were exhausted. The babies were crying constantly from the noise, and one had terrible cramps. That's when I started researching radio pirating laws. Turns out, his massive antenna was illegal, and the broadcasting equipment could land him in jail with fines up to 45,000 euros. The local police were useless. When we called about the noise, they actually told the neighbors we complained. The boyfriend confronted me the next day, warning me to never call the cops again, or else. Then came my opportunity. He asked me to trim some ivy that was tangling with his antenna, saying I could go into his garden while he was out. Bingo. I took photos of all his equipment through the windows while pretending to trim the plants. By then, we'd already secured a new house, so timing was perfect. I contacted the telecommunications agency and my nephew, who worked in law enforcement. They set up a routine investigation in the area to avoid suspicion. We moved out 2 weeks later, and they raided his house 2 days after that. The boyfriend got caught with illegal broadcasting equipment, an uninsured car with failed inspections, and since it was his third offense, he got 12 weeks in jail and a 30,000 euro fine. His girlfriend got community service. They had to sell the house. A year later, I saw them at the grocery store. If looks could kill, I'd be dead on the spot. But hey, they couldn't do anything anymore. The whole street celebrated when they moved out, and peace finally returned to the neighborhood. It turns out being a bully and making enemies with everyone isn't such a smart move after all. I never really understood why my biological parents gave me up just because I was born blind in my left eye. It's not like I was completely blind. I could see perfectly fine with my right eye, but apparently, having a defective child wasn't part of their plan. So, there I was, bouncing from foster home to foster home for 14 years, while potential adoptive parents passed me by because of my condition. Just when I was starting to lose hope, the most incredible family came into my life. They were older than your typical adoptive parents. My adoptive mom was in her 50s, and my adoptive dad was in his late 50s. They already had grown children, and my oldest sister's son was only 2 years younger than me. But none of that mattered. They saw past my eye condition and gave me the loving home I'd always dreamed of. When I turned 18, my dad offered me a job as a waiter at his restaurant. I was thrilled to help out with the family business. My left eye is naturally whitish, so I wear a contact lens to make it look more normal. But instead of going with a regular contact lens, I chose one that looks like a Sharingan, from that popular anime. Most customers either don't notice or don't care, but there's always that one person who has to make it their business. About 2 months into the job, this lady, who looked around my mom's age, kept staring at me throughout her entire meal. When it was time to bring her bill, things got weird. She asked me about my contact lens, questioning if it made it difficult for me to see. I simply explained that the eye was blind, so the contact was just cosmetic. She turned to her friend at the table and started digging through her purse. Next thing I know, she's pulling out this bottle of oil that smelled like someone had fermented a flower garden. She then demanded that I come closer and keep my eye open, claiming she could fix everything. When I refused, she got increasingly agitated, insisting that her magnolia oil was blessed with healing properties and that she had supposedly cured dozens of people. I kept declining her offers, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. She started calling me ungrateful and difficult, claiming she was just trying to help. The situation escalated to the point where my dad had to intervene. He politely asked her to leave the restaurant as she was making me and other customers uncomfortable. She responded with indignation, saying she was just trying to help a poor disabled boy and that we were all ungrateful. Then she stormed out. A few days later, she came back. I didn't recognize her right away, and that was my mistake. When I approached her table to take her order, she grabbed my arm with one hand while trying to poke my eye with her other oil-covered hand. I yelled at her to stop and let go, but she just kept insisting that it was for my own good. Pure instinct took over, and I started kicking to get her off me. One powerful kick, fueled by pure adrenaline, sent her flying into the chairs behind her. The whole restaurant went silent. My dad rushed over and had other staff take me to the back while he dealt with her. The police were called, and with a restaurant full of witnesses, there wasn't much room for debate. They arrested her for assault, and we later found out she was part of some alternative medicine group that believed they could cure everything with essential oils. She ended up getting sentenced to 6 months in jail and was ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order banning her from coming anywhere near me or the restaurant. The whole incident actually brought our restaurant some positive attention. Our regular customers became even more supportive, and we even got featured in the local news as an example of a business standing up against harassment. My dad used the opportunity to start a small campaign supporting workers with disabilities, and now our restaurant is known as one of the most inclusive employers in the area. As for my eye, still blind, still rocking the Sharingan contact lens, and definitely not interested in any miraculous oil cures. After going through a really toxic relationship that left me with severe depression and anxiety, my grades took a nosedive. My mom, worried about my mental state, enrolled me in this small school that was specifically designed for students like me. The school itself was tiny, just one hallway with a handful of classrooms, and you'd barely see 30 students on any given day. Most of the teachers were incredibly supportive and understanding, except for one, my math teacher. From day one, you could tell he thought he was untouchable. Within the first week, he went from half-heartedly teaching to not teaching at all. He'd just play TV shows during class time and frequently disappeared to chat with the principal, who happened to be his best friend at school. They were like two peas in a pod, always giggling about something in her office when they should have been working. But what really got under my skin was how he treated us. He was cruel to the pregnant students in the Young Mothers program that shared our building. One day, I overheard him talking to another teacher in the hallway. He was calling the pregnant girls idiots and saying they'd be dependent on their parents forever. His words were cruel and dismissive, treating their situations like jokes instead of serious life challenges. The way he spoke about us students with mental health issues wasn't any better. He would complain loudly about not signing up to babysit crazies and suggest we belonged in mental hospitals instead of his classroom. He even had horrible nicknames for students with learning disabilities and would mock students who were struggling with self-harm. It made my blood boil, but I kept quiet for months. The final straw came when he started trying to convince students to drop out and enroll in some sketchy online diploma program. He even approached me after class one day with a sleazy proposition. He offered to sign off on my required community service hours if I helped him recruit other students for his online school program. When I refused, he made a snide comment about how none of us students were going anywhere in life anyway. That night at dinner, I finally broke down and told my mom everything. To my surprise, when I mentioned his name, she revealed that she'd been trying to get him fired for years but couldn't due to her limited power on the school board. That's when I hatched my plan. The next day, I brought a notebook to school and started collecting statements from other students. I went around asking everyone if they had experienced any inappropriate behavior from the math teacher and if they'd be willing to write it down. The stories came pouring in. One student recalled how he'd shamed a pregnant girl about her choices in front of the whole class. Another described how he'd humiliated them for asking for help with a math problem. The stories were endless and horrifying. Over the next week, I collected around 30 statements from students and even a few from sympathetic teachers. I wrote my own 3-page account of everything I'd witnessed. My mom took all the evidence to the school board. For weeks, nothing seemed to happen. Then one day, he just didn't show up. We got a substitute teacher instead. I ran into one of the school counselors at the grocery store a few months after graduation. She shared the satisfying aftermath of what had happened to the math teacher. Not only had he been fired, but the school board had reported him to the state education department, resulting in his teaching license being revoked. She told me he had to move back in with his parents and couldn't even get hired at local fast food places because word had spread about how he treated vulnerable students. The counselor then shared the most satisfying detail of all. The online diploma program he'd been pushing turned out to be a scam, and he was under investigation for that too. He would never work in education again. I've always been the type of person who doesn't back down from a fight, especially when it comes to corporate nonsense. Grew up with a single mom who worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. That's probably why I ended up becoming a consumer rights advocate, helping people fight against predatory billing practices. My boyfriend got into a minor accident last month. Nothing too serious, just a sprained ankle from slipping on some ice. But the hospital visit was necessary to make sure nothing was broken. When the bill came in, I nearly choked on my coffee. $5,000 after insurance for a sprained ankle. I offered to handle the bill for him, mentioning that I'd done this kind of thing before. He seemed hesitant, warning me that these things could be a real hassle. I assured him that I knew exactly what I was doing. What he didn't know was that I was about to unleash my full arsenal of corporate warfare techniques. First step was getting him to authorize me to handle his medical records. Then I requested an itemized bill which showed they were charging 7 times the national average for every single procedure. I started with a billing department, like any reasonable person would. When I called about the incorrect bill, the representative quickly brushed me off, saying they just collect payments and I'd need to talk to administration about disputes. 3 hours later, after being bounced around various departments like a ping-pong ball, I decided to change tactics. I spent an evening doing some research and compiled a list of email addresses for the hospital's board of directors, upper management, and even their investors. Every day I sent a few carefully crafted emails, starting with middle management and working my way up. Each email detailed how they were overcharging by 700% compared to market rates and included a growing list of everyone who had failed to address the issue. My boyfriend was initially oblivious to my crusade, until one day I excitedly told him about the good news that they had reduced the bill. When he asked about the new amount, I triumphantly told him it was $26. He was shocked and asked if I meant 26 as in 26. When he asked how I managed it, I proudly showed him my phone. His face changed as he scrolled through the 60-plus emails I'd sent over the past few weeks. He was horrified, questioning why I had contacted their board of directors and investors. I explained that the normal channels weren't working, but he called it crazy. He said he just wanted me to dispute the bill normally, not wage psychological warfare against an entire hospital. I defended myself, pointing out that I'd saved us $5,000, but he insisted I had gone way overboard and called it harassment. I argued back that they were trying to rob us blind and I had only made them justify their ridiculous prices. What happened next surprised even me. The hospital's chief financial officer personally called me. He said they'd reviewed my concerns about their billing practices, and while they maintained their prices were justified by market conditions, they decided to adjust my boyfriend's bill as a one-time courtesy. Then he brought up how I contacted nearly every member of their leadership team. I defended my actions, explaining that no one at the lower levels would address the blatant overcharging. He told me they were willing to settle this matter completely but needed my written agreement to cease all communication with their board members and investors. I countered that I would agree to stop when they explained why they charge 7 times the national average for basic emergency care. There was a long pause before he made his final offer of $26, asking if we had an agreement. I told him to send it in writing and I'd consider it. The next day, we received an official letter confirming the reduced bill, along with a formal apology for any billing inconsistencies. My boyfriend still thinks I went too far, but I noticed he kept a copy of all my emails. Last week, his sister got a huge hospital bill for her son's broken arm, and she reached out to me for help. I eagerly asked if she was ready for another round of corporate email campaigns. My boyfriend just sighed and asked me to try to keep the body count lower this time. I told him I couldn't make any promises, explaining that these billing departments need to learn that some people won't just roll over and pay whatever number they make up. I've started helping other people in our community fight their medical bills too. Turns out my boyfriend's sister shared my emails with her friends, and now I've got a whole network of people learning how to stand up to predatory billing. The hospital's board probably regrets teaching me just how effective a persistent email campaign can be. My inbox is now full of success stories from people who've saved thousands using my techniques. Someone even suggested I should start a consulting business, but I prefer keeping it grassroots. There's something satisfying about watching ordinary people learn to fight back against corporate greed. The hospital recently announced they're reviewing their billing practices to better serve the community. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that their investors started asking uncomfortable questions about their pricing policies after getting dozens of detailed complaints from angry patients. My boyfriend's come around mostly, especially after I helped his cousin reduce a $12,000 emergency room bill to $500 last week. Now he just rolls his eyes and asks how many emails it took this time. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.